A army medic suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder becomes a serial bank robber after an addiction to drugs puts him in debt. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to my channel, Movie Files. Elliot back again with a brand new early movie review, and today we're discussing the new drama coming to theaters February 26th, but will be available to stream on Apple TV Plus come March 12th. I'm talking about the film starring Tom Holland, directed by the Russo brothers. We're talking about Cherry today. Now, I'm going to let you all know what I thought of this film, and if you all should be excited for this movie in this spoiler-free review. But before we dive into the details, as you all can see on the screen now, make sure you all are following me on all my other social media accounts, which you can find those links in the description below. If you are new to the channel, welcome to this community. Consider subscribing to the channel, and while you're at it, hit that notification bell. That way you all can get the alert from when I drop new content. It will mean the world to me if you all can like and share this review. It helps out the channel a lot, but I also appreciate all the support. And in the comments below, let me know if Cherry was a film you all were looking forward to. And once you've gotten the chance to see the film, let's discuss it. Let's talk about the film's direction, the story, the performances, and let's have a good discussion about it in the comments below. So this is a film that I had circled on my calendar. I'm a big fan of Tom Holland. I'm not one of those people that only see an actor in a role like Spider-Man. I think he's a great up-and-coming actor. Seeing him years ago in Impossible, just last year in The Devil All the Time, I think he's a great up-and-coming actor. And hearing the Russo brothers speak so highly about his performance, I was looking forward to seeing him take on that new challenge. And then speaking of the Russo brothers, I'm a big fan of their MCU work, whether it be Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame, seeing their name attached to different various producing projects. I like them as directors, so I was excited for this film, Cherry. Here we are discussing it early, and starting off with the positives. Let's start with the lead of this film, and that is Tom Holland. Again, seeing him as this film gives us at an early 18, 19-year-old freshman in college, falling in love for the first time, having his heart broken, which leads to him going to war, seeing him handle the war, coming out of the war, suffering from PTSD, getting hooked on drugs, robbing banks. I think this is the best performance that I've seen of Tom Holland in his young career, and that doesn't discount his great roles in the MCU, his other roles that I mentioned earlier. But the reason I say I think this is his best performance is because I honestly think he didn't have that much to work with in the script department, which we'll talk a little bit about later. But I feel like he elevated this character that was somewhat lacking depth. I think of him, again, the range of emotions of a 18-year-old all the way to someone in their mid-30s by the end of the film, and everything that he gives us, the vulnerability, the fun moments, the sad moments, the frustrating moments. I thought that Tom Holland really gave us a lot of a performance from the lack of depth from this script, which again we'll talk a little bit about later. But also, speaking of solid performances, I thought his chemistry with his co-lead, his love interest in this film, played by Ciara Bravo, who plays Emily, again another character that kind of lacked understanding of this character, where she comes from, really lacked character development. I thought that she gave us the best that she could in this role. I felt her love at a young age for falling for Tom Holland's character, Cherry, who doesn't really even have a name in this film. You can understand how she fell in love with him. You can understand why she waited for him to come home from the war, and how she dealt with him dealing with PTSD, how she fell into drugs, how she became part of the scheming of the bank robbers. So you can you can understand where the character's coming from, even though it really necessarily wasn't in the script. So again, I thought these two up-and-coming actors really gave us more than what was given on the page, and I really applaud them for their roles, which also brings me into this film has moments that I enjoyed. There's chunks of it that I really wasn't engaged with, but there were moments that I was invested in. One of those moments, this film is kind of broken up into different parts, and each part has about a 35-40 minute kind of exploration into these particular moments of this character, Cherry. And my favorite part was probably part 2, which was titled Basic, which shows us of him going from a freshman in college, had his heart broken, into going to Iraq, him becoming a medic, and all the stuff, that 35 minute runtime. It had some flaws, but for the most part, for me, it was the most cohesive. It was the most engaging, the most intense, most emotional moments for me of the film. And it will be really interesting to see how people that have served in the Army, people that are veterans, I would be really interested to see their take on the Russo brothers showing Cherry's perspective of the Army, how he felt it was kind of a waste of time, how he hated the Army, how he perceived the Army. I really want to know what veterans kind of took that as, because again, I thought it was just his particular point of view, but I would love to know how you all think that have served in the military. the authenticity of those moments. But again, to me, it was the strongest part of the film, which also brings me into the technical aspects. This is a independent film of compared to the Russo brothers' past work. It's a $10 million budget. It was very independent at times, experimental of sorts, but I did think that the cinematography was clean in the film. The score by Henry Jackman, who's worked with the Russo brothers before, I thought it was a strong score. It brought a little bit more life to this almost lifeless film at times, so I thought the score was there. And I'll say, again, certain parts, the epilogue, the last 15 to 20 minutes, which doesn't have any dialogue, I thought was a satisfying conclusion for this story. It might have not worked for everyone, but I like how the film kind of wraps up and the emotional moment that we get at the end of this film, which transitions. Let's talk about my criticisms. I think, so this film, Cherry, is based on a book by the name of Cherry, which was written by Nico Walker, who this was a semi-biographical film based on his life. And I gotta say this is my biggest flaw with this film. I didn't find the story to be that all interesting. It felt very generic and very bland. I think that also plays into the screenplay, which I thought was extremely underdeveloped. And also, it's crazy how this film was almost 2.5 hours, but there were moments that I felt like the film was rushed, which is very weird to say. But for example, I felt like the film at the beginning of the movie, even though I thought that Tom Holland as Cherry and Emily, I thought that their young love was rushed and kind of forced. I liked the performances, but I felt like those moments didn't feel earnest. Him going into the army, even though that was my favorite part of the film, even those moments, some of the characteristics, some of the moments that I felt like we should have set in a scene a little bit longer, they just kind of went by it. They kind of underdeveloped those moments. To seeing him coming home from the war, coming from the army, suffering from PTSD, him going into drugs and all the issues that came with that, it just didn't feel all that engaging. It felt like here's me watching the film, and the film's like all the way here. I just wasn't connecting to what was going on the screen. Again, it was words that come to mind, generic and bland. Going into the direction, again, I said it up top, I'm a big Russo brothers fan, but it's so interesting when you look at Hollywood siblings that direct movies together. I think of the Coen brothers, the Wachowski sisters. It's always weird to think like, okay, which sibling directed that scene? What was their responsibility in that moment? Who decided to put this in the film? I say that to say that it felt like there were multiple directors directing this movie. Again, this film was broken up to parts, and each part was missing depth, was missing emotions at times. It was just so much going on. It was a very messy film, and I thought that the Russo brothers didn't have a good direction on where they want this story to go. Each of the parts just felt so disoriented and felt so abrupt, and the transition from one part to the next didn't feel organic. They didn't have a grip on the direction, in my personal opinion. Their direction was way too over stylized for this subject matter. Like, for example, seeing Tom Holland's character breaking the fourth wall, which I don't know if that's part of the book of the character breaking the fourth wall. I felt like those scenes took me out of the moment because it was very apparent what was going on in the character's mind. We didn't have to hear him look at the camera and say that. There were choices with how they use the camera that just felt this film felt like it was way too over stylized because it was lacking the script. It was lacking something to engage the audience with. So they're thinking like, okay, let's break the wall to get the audience engaged. Let's do these sweeping shots to make it feel like it's more than what's going on the page. I think they had to compensate for the lack of depth, what was going on in the story. The Russos feel like they were doing an impersonation of a Martin Scorsese film. Again, I felt that their direction was messy, and I think at the end of the day, I feel like it was never defined. And that was really unfortunate because I'm a big fan of their direction in other projects that I've seen them in. Lastly, again, seeing there were chunks in this film that just felt so underdeveloped, so underwhelming. And the second half of this movie is the weakest aspect of this film for me, and it mostly involves the supporting characters in these second parts of the film. I think of Jack Reynor, who I'm a fan of his work. He looks just like Seth Rogen in another universe, but his character, I believe he went by Pills and Coke. That character to me was like in another movie. There's a character by the name of Black who isn't black like his skin complexion is black. He goes by the character. His name is Black. That character was terrible. Like, he was barely in the film, but when he was on the screen, it felt like, again, all the characters from Pill and Coke to Jack to Cherry's friend to the lack of the parents being involved in the story, all of the lack of characters and the characters they decided to put in that second half really made, which is supposed to be the most emotional moment of seeing him suffering from PTSD, getting addicted to drugs, this opiate issue that was going on during this time period, him becoming a bank robber. Those are supposed to be like the heavy, hard-hitting moments. moments, but all those subplots and those characters did not work for me at all. And again, the Russos, this is a very experimental independent film. It felt like I was watching an amateur student film. And I hate to say it because I love the Russos, but this felt like this would have been their first film versus them already having directed some of the biggest movies of all time. This felt like a step back for directors for me. And lastly, the pacing of this film was awful. It's almost 2.5 hours, and it was a chore. It took a lot to get through this movie because it was literally chunks in this movie that I was just completely disengaged with the story, which is very unfortunate for any type of movie going experience or movie watching experience, as I say. So with all that being said, before I give you all my overall thoughts and my score, make sure that you guys have liked this video and make sure to share the video. Leave your thoughts in the comments once you've seen the film. If you share my same sentiments or if you feel completely different, let me know that, as well as subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss any of my other content. With that being said, let me share with you all my overall thoughts and my score for Cherry. So overall, I do want to applaud the performances by Tom Holland and Ciara Bravo. I thought they were the saving grace of the film, and this continues to show that Tom Holland is more than just Peter Parker. The film has a solid score, some clean cinematography. There were moments that I enjoyed of the film focusing on Cherry, him going to war. The epilogue felt earned. It felt like it was a good conclusion and felt like it was the most put together parts of the film. But unfortunately, there were chunks of this film that were extremely messy, underwhelming, underdeveloped, rushed, and flat out boring. And I think that is at fault of the direction, and also the writing of this film is to blame. With that being said, I'm going to give Cherry a 2.5 out of 5, which really sucks because I was looking forward to this movie. Again, I thought there was a strong performance by Holland, but everything else, Holland as well as Ciara Bravo gave a good performance, but everything else, from the acting, from the supporting characters, the story, was very disappointing. So that's just my thoughts. Again, this film will be available in theaters February 26th and on Apple TV Plus March 12th. Once you've seen this film, Cherry, let's talk about it. If you disagree with me, no problems. That's why I make these videos, to have an interaction with you all. But once you've seen the film, and if you're in the same boat with me, let's talk about that as well. As always, make sure to like the video, share the video, leave your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit the bell. That way you don't miss any of my other early reviews. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Hope you're staying safe, and we'll see you in the next video.